Welcome to FO Podcasts. With me today is a business leader who worked for the Tatas. Hoshang Billimoria is an articulate, experienced, seasoned old Tata hand, and with him we'll be discussing the glory years of the Tata Empire and the way Indian business used to be. Welcome, Hoshang.
Thank you.
All right. So, Hoshang, you came back from England and you were a chartered accountant and you were working in a chartered accountancy firm and you miraculously ended up in the Tatas. What's the story there?
Well, I qualified in England with a firm called Winnie Murray, which is now better known as Ernst & Young, and came back to India and joined their correspondence called SP Billimoria, no relations. And I was a partner there for, 9 years. The profession at that time in India was very different. It was extremely poorly paid. Audit firms were identified with particular groups, and audit standards were nowhere near what we saw in the West. And most audit firms also were not handsomely rewarded. Taxation work was there, but individual and corporate taxation was also not handsomely rewarded as it is today.
Well, it was a socialist country, lest we forget, at that time.
Absolutely.
And of course, Jawaharlal Nehru, our first prime minister, was greatly inspired by the Soviet model. And he thought profit was a dirty word. If I remember correctly, he said so once.
Mm-hmm. And at that time, none of the international firms were in India. So the idea of modern techniques percolating through had still not entered the realm of most of the firms in existence. I just happened to be at a dinner hosted by a leading doctor in Bombay, and I met the chief executive of Tata Sons there, quite by accident.
You mean Chandrasekhar?
No, at that time it was Mr. Meenu Modi.
Okay. You mean we are talking about back in the day when you were a partner?
Yes, I'm talking of 1987.
Aha.
And we had a small chat, and I was very surprised that the next week I got a call and he asked me to come and see him.
And who was this gentleman?
He was Meenu Modi, who used to be a senior partner in Ferguson and Company Chartered Accountants, and who had made his way into Tata's. And when I actually met him, he was the CEO of Tata Sons. So one thing led to another, and he asked me to join the Tata Group. I was very interested in being in general management rather than being stuck in a very limiting audit world, and therefore welcomed the idea that he put forward. I met a number of directors in Tata Sons, ranging from Nani Palkhiwala, Darbari Seth, Shahrukh Sabawala, Jamshed Baba, Soonawala, and of course, Mr. JRD Tata, who was a simply magnetic personality. In fact, I still treasure the time that I spent with him. Unfortunately, I got to know him in the latter part of his career. But the first thing that happened when you meet him is how humble he was, how he put you at ease, and he just oozed charisma. He sort of enthused you to give your best to him. And that is a quality which is not very common, I may say, amongst business leaders.
Or any leaders, actually.
Yes, of course.
That's a very rare
political
quality.
leaders as well. Yes, I agree with you. The only other person I can think of much younger than JRD, of course, who was that sort of humility, graciousness, and who has also let grass grow under his feet, is Deepak Parekh. He
was just retired from,
that's right,
from HDFC.
He walked into HDFC, yes, courtesy his uncle, but he took the job with a huge challenge. And what he has created today is absolutely stunning. Nobody else in this period has done what he has done. You've got HDFC, you've got HDFC Bank, you've got the two insurance companies, you've got the mutual fund and several other companies. So he's created a virtual empire. And as a professional manager, Deepak should be standing head and shoulders above the rest. I don't think he's been given his due in India as a professional manager.
Now, let's go back to JRD.
Yes.
And you said he had the ability to let grass grow under his feet. And walk us through that. Tell us what that really means.
Well, what he did, he had a knack for identifying, supporting talent. And he created outstanding entrepreneurs out of those people. And I can name just three. You've got Rusi Modi of Tata Steel. Then you've got Darbari Seth of Tata Chemicals and Tata Tea. And Ajit Kerkar of Indian Hotels. And each one of them performed magnificently for the Tata Group during their reign.
Now, each one of them was a completely different character. And you knew them. And you were telling, for instance, a Rusi Modi story about him remembering a particular driver. So why don't you paint a picture of each of the three? What made each of the three special?
See, let's take Rusi Modi first. I used to meet him when he used to come to Bombay House once a month or so. His Mercedes car used to be parked on the west side of Bombay House. One day when he arrived, he saw a new driver who he didn't recognize. So he asked him, he said, "Who are you?" He happened to be my driver. And he said, "Sir, I am Henry D'Souza." He said, "You're new here?" He said, "Yes." He said, "Who are you working for?" So he said, "I'm working for Mr. Billimoria Saab, who's also new, and he's on the 4th floor." So, "Good luck, Henry," said Rusi Modi. And Henry reported this to me. 3 months later or so, 3 or 4 months later, Rusi Modi was again in Bombay, and he saw Henry next to the elevator. He went up to him, slammed him on his back, and said, "Hi, Henry." And Henry was in 7th heaven. He said, "Oh, Rusi Modi Saab, what a wonderful man he is." And that was his magnetic touch. In HR, very few could beat him. And which is why, of course, Tata Steel prospered under him. Located in Bihar, Tata Steel had its own challenges.
It was in Jamshedpur at the time.
Right, yeah.
And this was a time of strong labor unions and managing the political environment and the daily functioning of the steel mills wasn't easy.
Yes, he met all those challenges with great aplomb,
Yeah, so what he did was truly remarkable. By the way, the background noise you might be hearing on this podcast is a storm which is hitting Mumbai. And we are sitting in Hoshang's lovely flat with Chinese vases, nice porcelain, and great armchairs. But there's nothing we can do to control nature. The monsoon is hitting Mumbai in full force.
Well, to continue, we move on to Mr. Darbari Seth. He, again, was someone who put you at ease. I used to meet him once a month, even after I moved to Tata Press. And he kept in close touch. He was like a father figure. Every time we declared our results, he would write a letter to me congratulating us for the performance that the company achieved in that period. And competence-wise, he was exceptionally outstanding. Ajit Kerkar was on our board when I moved into Tata Press. And he was one of our most active board members. And his sheer competence shone through in our board meetings. So I can well imagine him being an excellent at what he did, meaning hotel management. So all three were outstanding in their respective fields.
Yeah. And they came to be known as the satraps. I remember from my youthful days.
I don't know whether that's the right term to use,
Yeah.
but nothing detracts from the fact that they achieved a lot for their shareholders. And those were times when it was difficult to do business in India, exceptionally difficult, and they achieved wonders.
So, two questions. You've mentioned two things. It was exceptionally difficult to do business in India, and they achieved wonders. So, paint us a picture of those times as to why it was so difficult to do business. And then once you've done so, then tell us, how is it that these three characters and other similar characters in the Tatas those days were able to work around them and succeed in the way they did?
Well, the number of approvals required just to start a new business or to diversify were legendary. And you needed an whole army of people to prepare forms, submit them, get the approval of the bureaucracy, get the blessings of the politicians. And once you did that, even selecting the state, selecting the land, etc., all that used to pose a number of challenges. So each period produces its own solutions. And I think all these three managers rose to the occasion and delivered their best at a time when India was in that particular economic environment.
Yeah, and the madness that descended upon India, which most of our listeners would not know, is that India had a colonial bureaucracy. That bureaucracy was fundamentally rent-seeking and parasitic. Mm-hmm. At the lower levels, it was incorrigibly corrupt. After independence, corruption seeped upwards instead of probity seeping downwards. And this colonial rent-seeking parasitic monstrosity was entrusted the job of imposing socialism. This gave them even more powers than during colonial times. And so then they killed people through the license, permit, and quota raj, meaning that you needed permissions to produce something. If you exceeded your capacity, then you were penalized. If you produced below your capacity, then you were penalized. You ran from pillar to post. You had to grease palms. It created a black economy that was diabolical. What it also did was it led to what is pejoratively, or what used to be pejoratively called, the Hindu rate of growth. It had nothing to do with Hinduism. It had everything to do with socialism and colonialism, and fundamentally an ideological political class and a rapacious bureaucracy. And to function in that environment, to start a business, particularly in manufacturing, particularly when you had to acquire land, which was a nightmare, when you had to deal with labor, which wasn't easy, and when you had to deal with so many permissions, was basically navigating a Kafkaesque nightmare. So that is the world we are talking about. And that is the world these gentlemen operated in. And give us a bit of a glimpse as to what made them so successful, because the Tata Group in those days wasn't bribing officials. They were not in political favor. In fact, they were positively out of favor. So what made these three gentlemen, and of course the group led by JRD, succeed the way it did?
Well, let's not forget also that managerial remuneration was strictly controlled.
Of course.
And the appointment of a managing director had to be approved by the central government.
Which meant some bureaucrat flunky sitting in his dusty office and making people wait for hours on end.
I remember that in the Tata Electric companies in the late 1980s, the managing director was drawing a remuneration of 7,500 rupees because that's all the government would allow. So yes, the environment was very difficult. Why did they excel? I think partly due to JRD's magnificent leadership. And also all three of them, given an opportunity, rose to the occasion and delivered. I think that's the correct answer.
Yeah. How did they rise? I mean, you've given us a glimpse of Rusi's extraordinary ability to connect with the lowest levels of employees and treating each person as special. So Rusi managed that well, and he was able to get people to pull along and work towards a common goal. What made, for instance, Darbari Seth special? What was the magic sauce?
See, Darbari Seth was very entrepreneurial.
I see.
He had an acute business sense, which explained how they made a lot of money out of the soda ash factories in Gujarat. He also saw the advantages of buying tea gardens when nobody else did, and that led to the birth of Tata Tea. So he was a super entrepreneur. And Ajit Kerkar was excellent at hotel management. Not every good manager can run a hotel because it requires an ability to run a hospitality system, which is different from any other business.
Different from a steel factory.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that is something that Ajit managed in his time at Indian Hotels.
I see. So much so for the three great lieutenants of JRD. What made JRD so great, apart from his magnetic personality, apart from picking good people and letting grass grow under his feet? What made JRD that we are speaking about him long after his death?
His personal integrity remained unchallenged.
And unimpeachable.
Absolutely. And people, I can remember a conversation I had with Mansingh Bhatta of Kanga and Company. We were together on one outside board. And he had told me that even Dhirubhai Ambani had tremendous respect for Mr. JRD Tata. And he said Dhirubhai Ambani did not have much respect for many other businessmen. So that in itself tells you a lot about JRD Tata's strengths.
I see. So personal integrity is one, management is another. I'm sure there are other facets. You have a JRD story. You met him. He was the second person, I believe, you met in the Tata Group. Mm-hmm. How did that meeting go? What happened in that meeting?
Oh, he asked me about my career, right from school, college, my accountancy education in England. And he, of course, had my entire CV with him, but he ran through it. He asked me questions about my parents, my family background. He also asked me why I did not settle down in the UK.
And what did you say to that?
And the truthful answer was I came back only because of my parents and nothing else. So, and he appreciated that, I think. Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the interview, you left with a sense of loyalty.
Happiness, satisfaction, and great deal of respect.
Uh-huh. And you were inspired to work for him, as you said.
Absolutely.
Excellent. So the Tata Group in the 80s, so the era you're talking about, is the period just before 1991, when India had, that year, the Soviet Union collapsed later in the year. The first war in the Gulf, the Iraq War, or rather the Gulf War, caused oil prices to rise, and India had a balance of payments crisis. And India then liberalized, and that unleashed a period of growth. So you came in just before that period. So paint us a picture of what the group was like before 1991, and how did the group change after 1991, the watershed year for the Indian economy?
Well, perhaps the only thing that can be said against JRD was that maybe he should have handed over the reins perhaps 5 years earlier. I'm nobody to judge that, but this was talked about at that time. In that way, there would have been a smooth transition to the next era. So that was about, if at all, he can be criticized for that. This is the only area. It was a difficult time, the succession period for the group, and I was in the midst of it all.
That is the internal side. Externally, how did you navigate this period? You go from being a socialist economy to suddenly 1991. And I remember I was very, very young then, but there was a lot of talk that when the economy would open, then foreign players would come in, and groups like Tata would not be able to compete. That, of course, has not been true. How did the company navigate 1991?
There are two factors here which played an important role. Most of the Tata companies were long established, solid, and had very strong balance sheets. Secondly, when India was opened up, foreign companies coming to India, all of them, virtually all of them, wanted to tie up with the Tata Group, which was a recognition of the respect with which it was held even internationally. So the transition became much more simpler.
And those two things helped tremendously.
Absolutely.
Tremendously. So you talked about the succession being very difficult, and I don't want you to breach any confidences, but give us a flavor of what were the difficulties during that era, because you were an eyewitness to all of it.
Each director at the senior level thought that he was personally the most qualified to take over from JRD. Therefore, that would create some degree of tension or friction. And the choice became clear much later. In his last days, of course, JRD handed over the baton to Mr. Ratan Tata.
I see. So the picture you paint is almost like a medieval court. A great emperor is ailing, and there are a number of contenders for his throne. And during that situation, generally, there's a lot of poisoning someone's drink or stabbing someone in the back in the dark going on. Was it a bit like that? Or
I wouldn't call it a medieval court, because at the end of the day, there was a certain level of decorum and ethics that permeated throughout the group.
So it wasn't a medieval court, it was a modern
I've never
corporation.
experienced a medieval court, so I can't answer.
No, I neither am I. I'm not that old myself, but you read in the history books and you read
But
about...
I would say they were difficult times.
I see.
Because each one was trying to find his own ally. Each one was trying to align correctly. And in the process, of course, that does create some heartburn. Some won, some lost.
Understood. Now, we won't get into that, but tell us how the Tata Group changed after JRD left, because he was a giant, he was a colossus. And what happened after his leadership? Because succession of such a towering figure for any organization, whether it is in politics, whether it is in the military, whether it is in business, is a difficult thing.
See, given the fact that India was opening up, there was no shortage of new opportunities for the Tata Group. MNCs used to come from abroad and approach the Tatas first. I remember Sony was not in India, but when Sony decided to come to India, the first meeting that Sony had was with the Tatas. So it was easier for the Tatas because of their credibility, their impeccable reputation. So it wasn't that difficult for them. Maybe other groups had a more trying time.
I see. Now, your own personal experience in the Tatas, you've had a glorious career. And why don't you walk us through, what did you come in to do and what did you finally end up doing in the Tata Group?
Well, I joined as the deputy CEO of Tata Sons. But after the reorganization, I was appointed as the managing director of Tata Press. I knew nothing about printing or publishing at that time. And I walked into a company which had lost half its share capital in 1 year.
Oh, dearie me.
And had terrible labor problems, absolutely hostile unions, etc. But the tide was turning. In fact, in my first month at Tata Press.
This is 1987?
No, this was 1990.
Oh, 1990, just the year before 1991.
That's it. We were, all senior managers were locked up in a room by the union. Can you believe this?
Oh, wow.
And we had
This is a bit like France.
And my chairman was Mr. Jamshed Baba. We managed to get
the brother of the great nuclear scientist.
That's right.
Homi Jahangir Bhabha.
And we managed to get through to him. And the police was called. And the workers just dispersed only after the police threatened to shoot. It was that bad at that time. And against all odds, we had a very gutsy HR manager as well. And against all odds, we decided that the kingpins behind the labor strife needed to be handled very firmly.
And you fired them.
And after taking extensive legal advice, we fired, I think it was 12 or 14 individuals, including the union leader.
Wow. In those days, that was
absolutely
unprecedented.
And when we fired the union leader, we were expecting the worst. But would you believe it? He started trembling.
Oh, dear.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he was basically a coward.
He was a bully. He was a thug.
That's right.
Yeah.
And of course, I had 14 years at Tata Press, which subsequently became Tata Donnelly and then Tata Infomedia. We had 14 glorious years. Each year saw increasing sales, increasing profits. We had 3 bonus issues and 2 rights issues during those 14 years.
Wow.
And we got into the area of yellow pages in India with conviction. Then we started direct marketing. We entered the field of publishing of magazines.
You were also, I remember when I was young, I saw Tata McGraw-Hill. You were in academic publishing.
No, that was a separate unit.
I see.
Where McGraw-Hill was in command. It was limited to the publishing of McGraw-Hill titles abroad for an Indian market, and mainly student-oriented titles so that they could be priced cheaply for Indian students.
But what did you publish in Tata Press? Give us
the Yellow Pages. We were in so many cities in India.
Yeah.
They were an extremely profitable business.
Yeah. The Yellow Pages, for those who don't remember those days, pre-Google,
correct,
were a directory of every city. And if you needed to look a hospital's number, if you wanted to contact the district magistrate's office, or if you wanted to contact just about anybody, they would be all there in alphabetical order, and you flip through the pages just as you flip through the pages of a dictionary, and you would find the relevant number. So
very much so. In fact, shortly after we launched, we had done the launch after taking extensive legal opinion. MTNL sued us, saying
blimey.
that you cannot publish telephone numbers. That was the prerogative only of a telephone company. We fought the case right up to the Supreme Court and won.
Who was your lawyer?
Initially it was Fali Nariman.
Oh, what a brilliant man.
Yeah, and then later on it was Mr. Chidambaram, our former finance
P.
minister.
Chidambaram, another bright chap.
Yes, very competent.
Yeah.
And so that much for the Yellow Pages. We also had a children's books section, which we used to be small books where children could read and paint and draw, the sort of thing which takes a child half an hour to do. It was launched under the brand Touchstone. And then, of course, we had the magazines.
And what were they?
We started with a photography magazine, then we had a car magazine, we had a hi-fi magazine, all special interests, because we were quite clear we didn't want to go into politics and news.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be acceptable to the group.
You were much sharper than me.
Well.
And these magazines.
And in the end, actually, when we were well into all this, all of a sudden, the government announced that we could not do new titles if we had any foreign equity. Tata Press was a listed company, and historically, it had some 6% held by some institutions in Europe. And on the basis of that law, we were not allowed to expand anyway in print publishing.
And this law came into being in which year?
I think it was I can't remember the exact year, but it was the year in which Midday wanted to go public. So it was a quasi-political decision.
So basically it was to cut you off at your knees.
That's right.
And who was the Prime Minister then? Which I'm trying to place which government was in power.
I'm trying to get the right name, but probably was Mr. Singh. I'm not sure though.
Manmohan Singh.
No, VP Singh.
VP Singh. Oh, that splendid chap from Eastern UP.
I'm not sure. It could have been someone else.
But
there was now no point fighting that. So we decided to move into audiovisual. And one thing led to another. And we actually produced a film with Mr. Amitabh Bachchan.
And what film was that?
It was titled Aithbar. Unfortunately, Bollywood is full of stories, and a lot of stories are correct. We got two-timed. Our director made the same movie with the same story with his girlfriend's brother.
Oh, lovely.
And released it 3 months ago.
What was the name of that movie?
I think it was called Inteha.
And
it was a total washout.
Okay.
But,
and was Amitabh Bachchan in that movie too?
No, it had hardly any star cast.
Okay.
But what it did was sour the taste for our film, which had been sold out in advance, but all of a sudden the territories reopened. And the initial response to the film was very modest. So we panicked and sold out on all the rights, but we were a little too hasty because, afterwards we learned from the guy who bought the rights that he had made 3 times the money that he paid us.
There you go. So you didn't quite succeed in the Bollywood business.
No.
Although
I must say, in all fairness, that Mr. Bachchan was a model of professionalism, etiquette, manners, excellent. He gave us absolutely no cause for complaint.
All right. So he was all right. The director wasn't. All right. So after that, after your venture in the movie business, what did you focus on?
No, at that point of time, a sudden decision was taken that, initially...
By whom? Sudden decision by whom?
By the chairman of Tata Sons. There was a McKinsey report which had identified core companies and non-core companies. And we were one of the non-core companies.
I see. So the good old McKinsey boys come in.
That's right.
They even did a report on the reorganization of the CIA. And old CIA hands have nothing but foul four-letter words to use when they address McKinsey. And apparently, according to them, it destroyed, in some ways, the magic of the CIA and many other companies. I've heard executives go absolutely bananas at McKinsey. They say that a lot of these shiny, bright young things who come out of Harvard Business School or Wharton or any other top school have no dirt under their fingernails. And they provide inputs that sometimes are insightful, but often are good on paper, but they end up destroying shareholder value. But anyway, so McKinsey got through to the Tatas as well pretty early, it seems, and they recommended.
So our company was put up for sale,
that
and
your company went.
It went to venture capitalist.
Venture capitalist or private equity?
Venture capitalist.
Venture capitalists. Okay.
And they were more interested in our properties.
Which one?
ICICI Ventures.
ICICI Ventures. Okay.
So we thought we'd give them a chance, but I quit in 3 months.
Why did you quit in 3 months?
Because, all that we had developed and nurtured as businesses were not considered as important. More important was to cash in on the proproperties. What you could call
asset stripping.
That's
it. Exactly.
Yeah.
We said the word together. Yeah. Now, I did my MBA at Wharton, and there is some value to private equity at times. They can bring out efficiency gains, particularly if a company is run poorly. But quite often, they're also very short-termist because, or for that matter, venture capital, because they have to return money to their limited partners. And they sometimes kill the golden goose because they asset strip a company into its parts, sell it off to the market. And before you know it, a thriving business is gone. And along with that business goes value generation. Along with that goes employment. So it can be a very sad and sorry story if you basically get caught in the backwash of a private equity tide.
Absolutely. This is exactly what happened. The company doesn't exist today. It was run down to the bone. After I left, we started a new company with the blessings of the SP Group and HDFC.
So just SP Group for foreigners. Shapoorji Pallonji, yeah. Which is a big group in India.
That's right.
In fact, one of the CEOs of Tata Sons was from that family, Cyrus.
Correct.
Yeah.
And over 150 people joined me in this venture.
That is when I met you, when you were running this venture, thanks to Mr. Shapoorji.
And of course, it wasn't as easy doing a new company like it was in Tata's. Lots of challenges, but it still exists today after 20 years.
And still you're doing niche magazines there.
That's right. Yellow Pages are history now because of the net and all that. But we do magazines and e-zines. Yeah. A lot of our readership, of course, is digital now. But that side has survived. A new CEO was taken over. I've retired. And life continues.
On that note, thank you for your time. It's been phenomenal speaking with you. A little bit of history of Indian business. We'd love to have you back from Atul Singh at FO Podcasts. It's bye for now.
Thank you.